Hey guys, we got a fantastic conversation today. Words of wisdom, stories from playing football at USC and being coached by Pete Carroll. That's what today's conversation with Thomas R. Williams is all about. And it's coming up right now on Sports Spectrum.
Welcome to Sports Spectrum, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, former ESPN producer, Jason Romano.
Welcome to the show. I am Jason, and this is the Sports Spectrum podcast. Really excited today for our guest, Thomas R. Williams, a former NFL linebacker and former college football linebacker at USC, a member of 3 Rose Bowl winning teams and 2 national championships. Listen to this career college record for Thomas R. Williams, 59-6. Yeah, he walked into a dynasty when he walked into those halls at USC in California, in Southern Cal, and understanding guys like Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart were there, and Pete Carroll as the coach and Ken Norton Jr. as his defensive coach. Like, this is what he was walking into, and the record of 59-6. Yeah, pretty good opportunity here for Thomas R. Williams to be around one of the great teams in college football, certainly in recent memory, at USC in the early 2000s. Before we get to our conversation with Thomas R. Williams, I want to tell you a little bit about our Sports Spectrum website. That's a great place to go every single day for the content relevant to you, the sports fan who loves Jesus. SportsSpectrum.com. Devotionals, podcasts, articles, and stories written on the intersection of sports and faith, all right there at SportsSpectrum.com. And make sure when you're there, you sign up for our Sports Spectrum weekly email. You go right to the top, and there's an area called Newsletter. You sign up for our newsletter, and the Sports Spectrum weekly email for free comes to your inbox, and it keeps you abreast on what's happening in the world of Sports Spectrum, maybe the articles or the stories or the podcasts that you might have missed, knowing you can't go there every single day. Well, you can get an email to keep abreast on all that we have going on with Sports Spectrum Weekly, and you can sign up at SportsSpectrum.com. All right, we got a great conversation today with Thomas R. Williams, dubbed the Professional Reminder. And that's where we begin our conversation. And then this guy, he's got some amazing stories of his time at USC, of his time in the NFL, and moving from passion to purpose. See, the passion that he had was football, but his purpose was something greater. Take a listen to Thomas R. Williams joining us right now here on Sports Spectrum. Hey, Thomas, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Man, Jason, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. I'm loving all the memorabilia in the back, taking me back to like my old school days of baseball and seeing Darryl Strawberry. And like, I just remember like even hitting my first home run. And so I'm like, oh man, I might've chose the wrong sport.
Crenshaw. That's where Daryl's from, out in California. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're in California as well, obviously played at USC. I want to start with this. Your website says you are the Professional Reminder.
Yeah.
What's that mean?
Yeah, that's crazy. When I got done playing, I met with, I think like a lot of people, you've been coached your whole entire life by, teachers, elementary through, whatever level, coaches, Little League, Pop Warner, middle school, college, high school, the whole 9. And so I wanted to go ask people in the regular world who weren't affiliated with sports. And I was like, hey, what can I do? So I met with people said you should do TV. So I met with TV people. I met, there's a model agency, there's movies, you should be a coach, you should be a trainer. I met with everyone. And I'll never forget when I was meeting with a casting agency. And he's like, tell me what Thomas is all about. I said, man, I'm a professional reminder. He was like, what does that mean? I don't know. It just came to me, Jason. I said, I want to remind people of what they've already said they are committed to doing. And so that's how the Professional Reminder came about. And so as a motivational speaker, as a facilitator, I'm not going to say anything new under the sun. I mean, look, here it is. I went to VHS, which is Vacaville High School. I went to USC, so there's 3 letters, and I played in the NFL. So I really keep it simple. And so I want to remind people of what they've committed to and said that they wanted to do. But somewhere along the way, we kind of lose sight of it, or we think that it's so far out And it's so different than what we're actually currently doing in our current circumstance that we just neglect what we've already said and committed we wanted to do. So that's what I am, man.
Well, we need that a little bit too, right? Like your book, Permission to Dream, is kind of a reminder to all of us to know that we have the permission to dream and to take chances and to step out of our comfort zone a little bit. So we kind of all need that, right?
Yeah, but I never, when I wrote the book and came up with the title, I never intended to say I had the permission. I just, again, wanted to remind people you've always had the permission, but sometimes we give people we give the wrong people the keys to our car, and then we expect them to drive when we're actually the ones in the driver's seat.
Yeah, that's good. You had the professional reminder as a nickname. Now, when you played, I should say, you had the Hitman as a nickname in college. So were you always that guy that wanted to just hit someone growing up? Was football always the sport as you were coming up? Yeah.
Yeah. So getting kicked out of recess in elementary school, that kind of ran its course short when at home, because I used to have to go home and write sentences like, I will not get kicked out of recess. I will not fight on the playground. Until I found organized football. And then they started to applaud you for like the bigger the hits. You know, I came from back in the day, and I don't know when I started high school, like in the late 90s or something like that. But I just remember like, wait, you guys are actually applauding me for this? And, I'm getting high fives for, the more aggressive and the more brutal the hits were. And so I carried that on to college. But when I got to college, I didn't have that attitude necessarily. And, one of the things I talk about now is the identity. And we have to understand is as people, sometimes we wear multiple hats. I have a cousin who reminds me constantly and says, who's at the table? Like, who is at the table? And so as I didn't have an athletic identity when I went off to college. So my mom had raised me to be polite and to be courteous and to be, cordial with everybody. And so I was being him on the football field. And so like, you hit somebody and you go, oh, excuse me. Oh, I didn't mean to, my bad. Until it wasn't maybe till my second year, I had Ken Norton Jr., who's the defensive coordinator in Seattle now. And obviously Coach Carroll. Yeah. Coach Norton just worked on me in my mental transition, where every single day we'd go into practice and we'd tap in, and you literally tap into the practice field. You tap when you leave the locker room, it says I'm in, which means that you're leaving who you are, in the streets, you're leaving that there. And then you're kind of transforming and morphing into whoever you want to be on the field. And I remember my second year, I just started hitting everybody, my team included. And so one day after we played Cal, and one day after the Cal game, I was running onto the practice field, and Coach Carroll was like, here's Thomas, the Hitman Williams. And I was almost like, who's he talking to? Yeah. And he was like, and then he said it a couple times during practice, like, all right, come on, Hitman. And I was like, wow, that's me. And so that day, the identity of the Hitman was birthed. And so, anytime you kind of come up with a nickname or your friends give you a nickname, you want to live up to it. Now, I won't lie to you. Sometimes I was the get hit man and sometimes I got ran over. But, it's like anything else, right? When you play the game long enough, you'll eventually lose, get juked or get ran over. So, but I will say that, I was the hit man more than I was the get hit man. But I did get hit.
Well, Coach Carroll told you that the hitman initially was Thomas the Hitman Hearns, right? The boxer.
Yes. No question. No question.
Yeah, he was a heck of a boxer back in the day. It's funny, boxers, all those guys had nicknames. And the idea of a nickname, I actually preached a sermon at my church about nicknames because Christ has nicknames too. When you think about the Bible and Jesus as, comforter and as, the Lord of Lords and, the living water and the breath, the bread of life. There was all these nicknames. And I thought about, man, it's cool when people have nicknames for you, but your identity can't be caught up in those nicknames unless you're Jesus. And so we bring Jesus into the conversation here. That's what we do at Sports Spectrum, Thomas. When did he enter the conversation for you?
Man, that's such a great question. And I love it. I think, the more and more I studied the Bible, understanding the different nicknames and what they mean and how you pray, and you're praying to, Elohim, Jah, Jesus, there's just so many names, and really understanding what they mean. And you're like, wow, that means a lot, but it's the same person.
Right.
For me, I wasn't raised in a church. I wasn't raised going to church on a Sunday. But I'll tell you, Jason, when Christ entered into my life, when I was 18 years old, my dad came to my high school graduation. And so my parents split up very early. And so my dad lived on the East Coast. He was in the military going through his transition. But I remember he came out to Northern California for my high school graduation. And he said, hey, I'm getting ready to leave the party. Walk me to my car. And so I'm thinking, oh man, this is the time when my dad's going to give me like some keys or something, $1,000. I mean, just our minds go to all these places. I deserve it. Right. And so he reaches to the back of his car and he hands me a book. And I'm like, all right, the keys must be in the book, or the money must be in the book, right? And he said, this book will give you more strength than I'll ever be able to give you. Like, what do you mean? And so I looked down at it, and it was a Holy Bible. I literally still have it. It's over there in my bookshelf, but it is the Bible that his boxing coach gave him when he was 16. Now, the reason why that story is important is because if my dad can transition from who I saw him as a young kid, the way he treated people, the way he treated my mother, the way he treated himself, the language, the lifestyle he was living, if he can transition that, I got to find out to the source of who transitioned. And so I went off to college. And again, now my identity is in sports. And so when I go off to college, it's the dog days of two-a-days. Back in the day when you could have two-a-days in college, and it was just brutal, like double-day practices, full pads. And I remember in between practices one day, the team chaplain, Mike Sylvester at USC, comes by and says, hey, why don't you come to chapel tonight? And I'm like, man, I'm getting my sleep. I go to bed early. I wake up early. You know, anytime I'm not practicing, I'm sleeping. He says, what if I could promise that you'll get more rest, more power, more strength from coming to chapel than you will from taking a nap and getting sleep? And I said, sign me up. I'm good. I'm there. And the interesting part about it is that the craving and the thirst for me came about because I'm a competitor, and most athletes are, is that when we were going to Bible study, and this was before the phones and you can go to the app, you had to actually take a real Bible, and people were turning to Genesis. People were turning to 2 Corinthians. People were turning to Proverbs. And I'm like, wait, what chapter is that? And they're like, no, there's books. And then there's chapters in the books. Like, I was just so blown away and also competitive, seeing that people knew the Old Testament, New Testament. People knew like, oh, this is over here in this book, or this story was said there, or they were repeating and reciting the different scriptures. And so from there, I just started to talk to my dad more because I wanted to find out more about him, his transition. But also my dad was using an opportunity to teach me, coach me, since he didn't when I was younger, through the word of God. And so, I mean, the stories and the scriptures that I know now all come from conversations with him, and also through the trials and tribulations that football gave me. So football was my air to breathe. But when I got done playing football, my air was taken out, but I had to continue to live life. And that's when God said, okay, now insert me.
Wow. Yeah, it's awesome. Thomas R. Williams is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, the former NFL linebacker. You walk into a USC locker room, by the way, that's just stacked, right? I mean, you came in there as a freshman, and immediately you realized it probably felt like the Beatles or the Yankees, or you walked into just an incredible thing that was taking place at USC with the Trojans and their football team during those years.
Yeah, no, it was they had just come off 11-2 season, beating Iowa in the Orange Bowl. That's when we committed. And that's when 23 of the top rated high school players in the country committed. I think 15 out of the 23, played A down in the NFL, which is unheard of. Wow. So, but I'll tell you a funny story. And people don't understand this until you've either been around sports, played sports, and experienced this. So I walked into the linebacker meeting room, and starting linebacker was a guy by the name of Matt Grudegood. And Matt Grudegood was a Buckus, I think like semifinalist, or might have been a finalist, but was a phenomenal football player. And so we're watching film, and this guy, number 6, is just all over the field, hitting big people, hitting little people, running down fast people, just all over the field. And I'm like, oh, if this guy can do it, I'm going to be gravy. 3 years and done. I'm probably going to go first round. Like, I just walk in this with this arrogance, 5-star. They told me I was going to be the next, Willie McGinnis, the next, 55, Junior Seau, rest in peace, all those players.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's number 6 at? Because I'm looking around the meeting room, like, where's number 6? And they go, he's that guy up there. Didn't talk, quiet, wore a flat bill, kind of like a skater look. And he stands up. Matt was 5'9", 5'10". And I was like, this is easy. I go out to practice, and then we do tackling drill against each other. And he hit me, and like the air came all the way out of my soul. And I was like, oh, this is why he's good. Okay, let me just rephrase my statement. And so I had to quickly get my mind around, okay, don't judge a book by its cover. And just because it looks like decaffeinated coffee, it's caffeinated for sure.
Mm-hmm. You walk in, and Pete Carroll's there too. And you kind of referred to Coach Carroll before, nicknaming you the Hitman.
Yeah.
I get to spend one day with him. And this was right when he left USC and went into the NFL with Seattle, 2010, I think, when I was at ESPN. I wrote about it in my book, and I saw this man, and what a display of leadership, passion, the real deal. Like you watch it on TV or you see it in a post-game interview or, on the sidelines, and you're watching him and you think, okay, is that how he really is when the curtain's, closed and he's behind the curtain and he's doing his thing with his team? I got to see him kind of behind the curtain when he had released his book, and I was super impressed. Like this guy, I wrote about how he was a thermostat and not a thermometer.
Yep.
Came in and he set the temperature in the room and everybody adjusted to that temperature. And it was usually a good temperature. Like he brought it up a lot. And I saw that in a small snippet at ESPN that day with him. Tell me you saw that every day. That's how he is?
Man, it's so funny you mentioned his book, Win Forever, because that was something I wanted to read after I retired and transitioned. I said, I want to see exactly what you're describing. I want to see how much of that is true. Because, you read books,
you were there.
Like, you listen to people and you're like, no, I've been with that person. That's not what they say, or that's not really how they feel. I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt, 100% as God is my witness, that is Pete Carroll. Mm-hmm. Like what is written in the book is exactly who he is on game day, who he is on the flights, who he is, in training camp, who he is in the hotel the day of and the night before the game. I mean, that is who he is in the off season. I'll tell you a funny story. Coach Carroll, Reggie Bush and I were roommates in college. And so during our freshman year, we were walking from the school, walking across the street to the bank, because we didn't have bank accounts at the time, but we wanted to cash our stipend checks. Right. And so Pete Carroll pulls up and he parks in not the handicap, but the red zone real quick, but he did put his hazards on. And so he hits the button and he's jamming to Outkast. Like, I like the way you move. Dun, dun, dun. And so like Reggie and I were like walking and we look, it's this Mercedes two-door, and we look and Coach Carroll gets out the car and we're like, what do you know about that song? He goes, what do I know about that song? I can play that song. And we were like, yeah, right. Getting ready to call his BS, right? A few days later, we walk into the team meeting room and Coach Carroll, it was Reggie and I, or was it the freshmen that were in there early? And Coach Carroll walks by, he goes, hey, remember what I told you the other day? And that's another thing about Coach Carroll. He has a phenomenal memory. He goes, remember what I told you the other day? I go, no, not really. What did you tell us? We're thinking about a football play or something like, this is a life lesson. He goes, I told you I could play that song. And so all of a sudden he gets up on the keyboards and he goes, da, 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 da. And you're just like, what? When this was with no book, this is with no nothing. And that's who he is. And so like you're talking about Coach Carroll being the thermostat and really, really taking the level to a whole new game. That's who he is. And that's who he taught us to be. And it's like, literally, we got personal development, life coaching, mental toughness building, mental awareness, self-awareness, rather. We got that for, if you went to school for 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, you got that training every single day. And it's crazy because people are asking me still now of like, hey, where does your mental fortitude come from? Where do your habits come from? Where do your mental toughness and your trainings come from? Like, which books you're reading? I'm like, I lived it. I lived it every single day for 5 years. And when I say 5 years, I was lucky enough to redshirt because Coach Carroll, even Coach Norton, he never trained us for football. He trained us for life and just used football as a microcosm to be able to train us for life. And so now when you get into the real world and you're like, oh my gosh, like I had to defeat double teams and cut blocks. This is going to be a breeze. You had to go through the double days of that and the competition. But what I say is like the greatest lesson that I learned at USC is that no matter the obstacle, no matter the opponent, compete your tail off, because every single battle, every single obstacle, there's a scoreboard. We don't know if we're in the first quarter of it. We don't know if we're in the second half, but we know that once it's over, it will show itself. And then you'll know if you competed and gave it everything that you had. And that's the thing that, win forever, compete forever. Like that is really Pete's mantra, because he really believes that no matter what it is, if it's rock, paper, scissors, if it's push-ups, if it's a game of, baseball, I want to beat you. Not because I want to make you look bad, but because I want to raise my level and I want to go to the extreme and to the ultimate level as high as I possibly can.
You probably aren't even realizing this when you're in college either. You're just like, why are we doing this drill and this and that? Like, where's the next meal that we're going to have? And like, let me go cash my stipend check. And you don't realize that all of this is kind of going to come back and fester itself and bloom, if you will, from the seeds that were planted later on. But you don't realize it when you're living it, right?
No, absolutely not. Like you think that, wow, this is fun. Because Coach Carroll always had a really good way of making a life lesson fun and seamless. For example, we would go to we're in the middle of training camp, and training camp at that time was maybe 20 something days. And so right there in the middle, Coach Carroll knew that his guys were running restless, and he knew that we were tired. And so he would always plant some type of activity that would take us out of our element, and we would have fun. So he took us a couple years. He took us to the beach volleyball tournament out here, Manhattan Beach, the big one in August. Yeah. And so you have a bunch of boys, young men who are 18 to 23, who are seeing women for the first time in 15 days. So imagine the mindset, and you're like, oh yeah, she likes me. I'm gonna get her number, the whole nine. So we're thinking, wow, our coach is really cool. But what Coach Carroll was doing is he was preparing us for sudden change. So we're ingrained in training camp. We're going through practice, and it's, the hot summer days. But he says, hey guys, this afternoon, we're going to go to the beach volleyball tournament instead of going to practice. So we're thinking, yes, this is going to be awesome. He was training us because we're going to go to away games. And this is going to be when our record is 9-0, and we need to win the next 3, and the next 3 games are on the road. And so we need to win those games, but we're going to get taken out of our element. How we do, not inside the lines, but how we do on the plane, how we do in the hotel, how we do in those other cities is going to determine the focus and the ability to win come game day. Now, he trained us in August for that. We just thought he was really cool, and he wanted to take us to see a whole bunch of, beautiful women and get away from sports, because he literally let us run rampant. He was like, hey, you guys got 4 hours, meet back here in 4 hours. And so he gave us that power. He also gave us the responsibility and the trust. Hey, protect your team, because rule number 1 is protect your team. So if you see your teammate doing something stupid, make sure that he doesn't do anything stupid and that you're accountable with him. Yeah. The thing I love about those moments is that now we get a chance to teach our families. Now we get a chance to teach our kids. Like I'm a dad of, she'll be 1 this month. And so now I get to give her freedom. And even, at 1, I'm teaching her freedom of, you can stand up on the couch. Now, I'm not going to hold your hand and tell you to get down. I'm just going to create different boundaries for you, but I'm going to let you think that you're roaming free, your independence, but because I'm not going to always be there. And so Coach Carroll taught me that lesson through some of the different things that he did. I mean, even bringing in people like Snoop Dogg, you bring in people like Will Ferrell, and it's like, that's Will Ferrell. And like, we're going to watch, Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, with Will Ferrell in the movie theater, or Snoop comes to practice, throws out a pass, catches the ball, raps against one of our, talented, most talented rappers, Eric Wright at the time. And you're just like, where does this happen? Only in a movie does this happen. But it was like, no, this happens in real life.
Guys, I want to take a quick break and remind you again about our Sports Spectrum magazine, our quarterly magazine available to order right now at sportspectrum.com. You can sign up. It's just $18 for 1 year. It's super cheap. You get 4 issues plus a couple of bonus issues. And I think it's the best thing that we do here at Sports Spectrum. It's certainly the only thing that we charge money for, but it's money that goes back into this ministry, and it's a great resource, the magazine, something you can actually hold in your hand, read, and give to someone else. Our Olympic edition is out right now, and you can subscribe at sportspectrum.com. You get 1 year, it's $18, but you can get 2 years for $30. So you can get a bunch of money saved off if you get a 2-year subscription. And every subscription now, you also get the magazine in your hand, but you get a digital version of the magazine emailed to you as well. So you get a digital subscription, you get the actual tangible magazine in your hand subscription, and you can do it all at sportspectrum.com for 1 year, super cheap, $18. Sign up today at sportspectrum.com. We're happy to have Thomas R. Williams here on Sports Spectrum, the former NFL linebacker. I want to talk about pivoting from college into the NFL, but even more than that, pivoting from the NFL into life. And you talked about how your faith and your identity and who you are as far as a child of God and the relationship with the Lord, how that really kind of transcended and grew after. Let's go into that area. Take me through that, because your NFL career, obviously you played in the league, but you didn't have probably what you were dreaming to have as far as an NFL career, but that prepared you for the next step. Take me through.
Yeah. People ask me like, what was your greatest highlight as far as being an athlete? And to be honest with you, it was being second and third string at USC. And the reason why, because it taught me that you never arrive. You never arrive. Like I would start a game and then I would sit for 4 because you got guys like Brian Cushing, Ray Malaluga, Keith Rivers, Kaluka Maava, Clay Matthews. Like these are guys who played in the league and you know, did well for themselves and were successful. Yeah. And so what I had to learn is that there's no days off. You can't take a practice off. Like if you were a starter and the guy who behind you who sucked. You cannot take a game off because if you get beat on this play, they're going to replace you with somebody who's probably better than you athletically. And so it taught me that going through every single day as a job interview, whether it's in the NFL and you're at practice and you're like, I just don't feel it today. I'm just going to coast. You better not coast because not only are you going to lose your spot, you could lose your job, which happened to me. Like, you know, you go to practice in the morning and you're cut that night on a plane coming back home or going to wherever you need to go. And so for me, I was always on guard in college because Ken Norton Jr. used to ask me the question, are you going to be a second team lifer? Like, are you going to be a lifer like second team? And because he knew how to get into my head and he also knew how to motivate and encourage me. That's what he was very good at. He could encourage individuals. And so for me, I kept that chip and I never forgot those words and I never forgot what it felt like to go up and down on the depth chart. But how does it help you? Because you're always understanding the process. I'm reading this book right now. Can't think of who wrote it, but it's Chop Wood, Carry Water. And it's all about the process.
Yeah, Joshua Metcalf. That's right.
Yep. And so it's understanding that it doesn't matter if, you know, because he's, you know, shooting bows and arrows and it doesn't matter if he had a great match and he, you know, hit 20 bullseye. The next day he's going to wake up, he's going to chop wood, he's going to carry water. And it's being really focused on the process. Now, as I transition into the NFL, I still have that mindset. But it's crazy, Jason, because one night during my second year, I was starting to come into my own. They say you make your biggest jump from your rookie year to your second year. And so I was 100% there and I was playing well. It was OTAs and I understood the defense. I was understanding the scheme. I was even starting to see things in the offense. I was coaching some of the rookies. Like it was, I was like, I'm arrived. This is it. This is my coming out party. I'm sitting in my apartment in Jacksonville and I'll never forget because I had a Scarface poster behind me that says, you know, I made it on my own. I need no one. It was like one of his famous lines. Yeah. And so I just got down on my knees and I prayed and I was like, God, make this fun again. Make this to the point where when I didn't know if I would go to the NFL, if I would go to the next level. And sure enough, be careful what you pray for because you get it. Sure enough, that training camp, I had the best training camp of my career. I get cut and there I am not knowing if I'm going to play football again professionally. And so because of that, then I went on the journey of ups and downs on different teams, different stops. But I always learned that God's preparing me not for where I am, but for where I'm going. I was prepared for where I am by what I went through. Right. And that's what I learned even when I got out of football, I played, you know, in Seattle, I went to Tampa Bay, I went to Carolina, I went to New England, and every single place I went to Buffalo, and Buffalo was a crazy story. But I remember every single place that I went to is that this is preparing me for life. And I don't know how, I can't tell you where I got that from or who even told me, like, don't look at these ups and downs as the struggle. Look at this as this is preparing you for life. And when I was in Buffalo, I remember I got cut literally in the middle of eating my breakfast. Like they didn't even let me finish eating my eggs. I was mad. It was crazy. My dad was on his way to Buffalo to come watch us play. One of my best friends was on his way to Buffalo. Like now I got to tell him as soon as they land, hey, I'm not playing tomorrow. Wait, why? Because, you know, a starter, you got demoted? No, because I got cut. Yeah. Hard conversation. But what I learned is when I left away is one of my mentors and big brothers on the team, Andre Davis, who played linebacker for 10 years in the NFL. He said, that's because you learned everything you were supposed to learn here and you taught everything you're supposed to teach here. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you got cut because your time here is done. You don't need us anymore and we don't need you anymore. And he wasn't saying in a way of like your services are done, like, you know, chalk it up. He was just being very real to the point of it's a lesson. Learn from it. Take it with you so that you can teach it. Now I'm able to talk about it and teach it. Yeah. But when I got done playing, the biggest lesson and when I heard God's voice the clearest Because in order to hear God's voice clearly, we got to get away from the distractions. We have it literally, like Jesus goes up to the mountain and he prays. Yeah. It's not Jesus surrounded himself with music and listened to a sermon and then, was on podcasts. Jesus got away from people and he went to directly connect with the Father. And it just means so much to me because when I got done playing, I went to church 3 days after my last practice. In 2012, and it was about a 45-minute drive from my home to church. And I was just praying, God, okay, you took football away from me. I'm done playing football, which means you have another plan for me. What am I supposed to do? And God was like, I'm going to tell you as soon as we get there. So I park my car, walk up to the church, and I hear the choir team singing, "My chains are gone, and now I'm free." Like, let that sit for a second. My chains are gone and now I'm free. And I had heard the song before, but I never heard that part of the song. And it was Amazing Grace.
Right.
And I mean, so many of us have heard Amazing Grace, but I know for me, I've never heard it. And I was like, oh, you must have something to say. So I'm sitting there and like, I felt like I was the only person in the church. And this is a big church. I mean, 3,000 people before the pandemic, obviously, when we could be in churches that size. Yeah. And there was a lot of people and I felt like it was just me and God having the conversation. And during the sermon, I couldn't tell you what the pastor preached about. I couldn't tell you what the message was, but I just remember God saying, you thought football was your purpose, but it was just your passion to lead you to your purpose.
That's powerful.
And a couple months later, man, which was first off, the feeling was so invigorating and it was so confirming. Football affirmed me and sports affirmed me when I was a kid. I sucked at school. I used to get yelled at around the house, but I was really good at sports always. That's where I went to kind of find my identity. That's where I had my value. Now that's stripped away from me. Now, God, I need another identity. And I also need to find my values. And so to hear from the creator, the source, you thought what you were doing was what you were created for. Like, it was literally like a switch. No. That was just to get you to now. I'm going to show you what you were created to do. And that's to be the light for people. That's to be the professional reminder. That's to be a facilitator. That's to be a coach. That's to be a trainer. That's to be a speaker. That's to be a mentor. Like, that is your purpose, Thomas. And God specifically said, I only had a few months to work with you because you were so wrapped up in football that now I get every single day. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And so literally, like, my speaking career didn't take years to do. I started it. That was in July. September 3rd, I was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, speaking with the military, the Wounded Warriors Projects, talking about transition. And the funny story about that is that I was green. I was terrible. I probably rambled. My story sucked. There was no continuity. Like, I didn't know how to tie it in. I couldn't land the plane. I was sweating. It was bad. And I remember there was this tall gentleman. He was like 6'6", bald head. And he was standing in line at the end. And I thought he was going to come tell me like my story sucked, because during the presentation, he was like off into space, looking at me with that deep stare of like, almost like I felt like he had to be there as opposed to wanting to be there. And he said, sir, there's a lot of people in this country that I don't like fighting for. He said, but people like you, it's a privilege to fight for. Thank you for sharing your story. And thank you for letting me know that I'm more than a soldier.
Wow.
And that's was awesome. Again, another affirming moment of this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah. And I just remember thinking like, God, are you kidding me? Like, how lucky am I? Like, I prayed at 7 that you would make me a professional athlete. I got there to that point, and now I get to do something. Because I wrote down, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? I want to speak to everybody right before they get ready to do something they don't even believe they can do. Because that was all the coaches that I had. My high school coach, my college coach. I didn't really have too many NFL coaches like that, but I had NFL players who I looked up to and respected who were that for me. And I wanted to be that for the world. Okay, who's your audience? People with 2 ears and a heartbeat. Like, that is my audience. And so I'm living it. And I started literally, 60, 70 days when I got done playing football. And so when God moves quickly. And it might not be when we want it to, but he moves exactly at a rapid pace on his timing. And so I've learned that with him. And so with the transition and helping athletes transition, current, former athletes, also helping people speak, coaching them to speak, because I've been a talker my whole life. I used to get kicked out of school for talking, and now I get paid to come back into schools and speak. And I talk to my mom all the time. I'm like, you owe me some butt whoopings. There's some butt whoopings you gave me, and there's some like grounded and restriction time that like I got like PTO on. Like I need that paid back, Mom. I was interning. I wasn't talking in class. I was interning for my profession. So I hit my 10,000 hours early, man.
That's awesome.
But it's been a heck of a ride. And to be honest with you, it's the life lessons that I didn't quit. Those are the things that I'm getting asked about now. And then Thomas, how did you make it through that? Not Thomas, what was it like getting drafted? Like, yeah, that's cool. They want to know, what was your first car that you bought? You know, what did you do with your signing bonus? Like, did you buy your mom something? Like, but they want to know how. First, they ask you why you do something because they think you're crazy and insane. Right. When they see that it's work for you, then they ask you how. And so I think I'm at a phase in my life where people are starting to ask me how.
Well, there's a couple things there. I think I can't relate to you being drafted.
Right.
Because I've never been drafted to a pro football team, but I can relate to going through trials. I can relate to people telling me, it's probably not going to work for you here. Maybe you want to try to find something else. I can relate to that.
Right.
And that's right. Where it connects. That's where the connection happens.
Yeah, every single time. I mean, because I was speaking with this group of athletes who want to get into speaking. And so talking about the story and the importance of telling your story, because we all think that, well, what do I have to offer to the world? What do I, because I didn't win a Super Bowl. I didn't go to the Hall of Fame. I didn't make, $100 million. I don't know LeBron James. I don't know Oprah. Like that's right. Kind of like sometimes where our mind is. And it's just to the point you just said, but you're a human being. Every single one of us has been a child. We've had to overcome obstacles. Not every single one of us, but a lot of us are parents. We have to juggle the balance between work, family, and life. Yeah. Every single one of us has gotten fired, demoted, told we sucked. There was an injury. You had to come back from that. Now, again, to your point of you might not know what it's like to tear your ACL, get surgery, and have to come back and play in a Super Bowl 7 months later. But you understand what it's like to drive in the driveway, look your family in the eye and say, hey, today it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. You know what that's like. And so how can I tell a story to captivate your attention, but also bringing you closer and giving you some life lessons, some tips, some reminder to say, look, the reason why I made it to the NFL, not necessarily because of what God gave me as far as speed, abilities, and talents, but it was because of the mindset that I had. It was because of the heart and because of the support system that I had around me. You can have that. Every single person can sit there and can do that. They can change their mindset. They can staple it in their heart, and they can change the support system or adopt a new support system to help them go to the next level. And that's what this whole thing is about. If I go through it, I'm supposed to teach you. If I go through it and hold on to it, it's just like the person in the Bible who it's like, well, I've built up my whole entire house and storehouse, and I have, supplies and everything. I'm ready for life. And God goes, well, who can you give it to? I can't give it to nobody. No one knows.
Yep. You got to tell someone. You got to get out there and you got to share what you have with others. That's what it's about. Thomas R. Williams. Fantastic conversation here. I want to make sure we get the website because we could spend hours talking about all the resources and different things that you do. But for time purposes, I want people to just go to the website and find out what, you can offer and how they can get in touch with you and all that. Is it just thomasrwilliams.com?
That's it. That's it. Good memory.
Thomas R. Because I was on it yesterday, but I'm like, I didn't write it down. So I'm hoping I got it right. Yeah. thomasrwilliams.com. You have a couple of books out, right? Permission to Dream, The Relentless Pursuit of Greatness. You're a member of my buddy John Gordon's speaking team, which is
JG.
Awesome. JG's my guy. John wrote the foreword to my second book on leadership, and he's been such a great mentor. You talked about mentors. He's been such a great mentor for me. I'm sure he's been for you as well. He's the GOAT, right? He's one of the great leadership gurus out there. And I just love John to death.
Man, John's awesome. I mean, that's another coach and another mentor of somebody who said, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I will definitely, I tell him, John, pull me along, grab me by my ear and say, hey, this is a nugget. This is a tip. And so, once a week we get a chance to connect. And I mean, a guy who's impacting the world and so busy, just so fortunate to have him, be able to call him friend.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. thomasrwilliams.com is the website. My last question, Thomas, for you. What's God teaching you today? So we've talked a lot about all of the different things that he's taught you through the years and all the lessons and different people in your life that he's placed to kind of show you and guide you. But he teaches us something new every day. Today, as we do this interview, what's he teaching you?
Yeah, great question. So this year, I don't know. So John taught me this thing is called the one word. So every year, you pick a word, what's your word for the year? And so I prayed about it hard. And God gave me for 2021 perspective. And so I was like, okay, well, what does that mean? And so I literally took a pen to a blank piece of paper and I just wrote down, seeing what it is, not what it looks like. And so what God is teaching me today is it's all about my perspective. It's about my perspective of being a dad. It's about my perspective of being a fiance. It's about my perspective with business. It's all about my perspective. For example, I haven't been on social media since December 31st, 2019. That was my last post anywhere. And the reason why is because there's no secret that social media is doing really good things. People will be able to watch this, but there's also a lot of damaging things that are happening, especially to the youth, because the youth don't have the mentality of reality versus, a virtual reality or a reality on social media. It's just all gets blended, which is causing a lot of damage. And so I'm on a quest to show people you can be successful, make a lot of money, and impact a lot of people without being on social media. So that's the reason why I'm doing that. And so with the perspective of, because sometimes the enemy creeps in and goes, you need to get out there more. You need to do this more. You're not posting as much as Jason. You're not posting as much as John Gordon. You're not going to get booked. You're not going to get this. You're not going to get this, because it's trying to pull me back in. And so the perspective that I have today is continue to go along with your path and to continue to be committed to your mission. Because if you don't believe it and you don't eat your own dog food, how can you ever serve it to anyone else? And it's like, that's the mindset that I have. So my thing right now, God is teaching me so much perspective about being a father, being a leader of a household. Because if I can't lead my household, then I'll never be able to lead an organization or a team that I speak to or I coach or I consult with. And so that's what God is teaching me every single day. And I get reminded of it quite often.
Well, I'll tell you, your biggest ministry you'll ever have, Thomas, is with that little one of yours and with hopefully future wife and with your family. Like, that's your biggest ministry. And I have had to have reminders of that myself with my family, with my wife and my daughter as well. So start there, and then the Lord will lead in the way that he wants to lead. So listen, brother, great to connect with you. Thanks for joining us here on Sports Spectrum, and hopefully we'll get you back on again soon. ThomasRWilliams.com again is the website. And he's been Thomas R. Williams. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it, man. Can't wait to connect with you in person when we get a chance to as well.
I would love that. And many thanks to Thomas R. Williams. Wasn't that a fun conversation? This guy, man, what stories he has. And I really appreciate him sharing his story. We'll have to get him back on because he suffered a career-ending neck injury in 2012. Played about 4 seasons in the NFL and has a ton of stories, I'm sure, from his time in the league. We could even have told more stories about some of the games that he was involved with at USC. So we left a lot on the table, and that's a good thing. That means when we have Thomas back, we can share some more stories of his time as a football player, but even more now as a speaker, as an author, as a coach, as a mentor, all the great things that Thomas is doing. We mentioned his books, Permission to Dream, and the second book, The Relentless Pursuit of Greatness. Love that title. The Relentless Pursuit of Greatness are available everywhere books are found, and you can order them and get in touch with Thomas at his website, thomasrwilliams.com. We appreciate Thomas. We appreciate you for tuning in as well. Thank you so much. Do us a favor. Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast, and then tell someone about this conversation or just about the ministry of Sports Spectrum. If you know someone who loves sports and goes to church and loves Jesus, Sports Spectrum's for them. And they might not know about Sports Spectrum yet, so make sure that you tell them. That way, it just gets this out. The opportunity, this resource, this podcast, whatever it is an opportunity to tell someone about Jesus. And maybe it's someone who just loves sports and maybe hasn't begun that relationship or isn't quite there yet in their walk with the Lord. Well, use Sports Spectrum as a resource. Send them an article. Send them this podcast. Send them the magazine and let them know about Sports Spectrum. That's really how we continue to grow, and we appreciate you so much. This is the truth. We really do appreciate you. This podcast would not exist if people didn't listen to it, and that's you. That's you listening to it. That's you telling someone about Sports Spectrum. The website again, sportspectrum.com. Don't forget to sign up for Sports Spectrum Weekly for free. Our newsletter right there on the website, sportspectrum.com. And join us next time for a new episode of the podcast. We love you guys. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.